maybe I don't understand it. You're changing, I can't stand it. My heart can't take this damage.
I wanted to try to simplify programming as much as possible and kind of just build up from there, and maybe even solve or help answer some basic questions through this video and maybe help somebody out. So we're going to start super basic. We have an array, and this looks probably, if you're new to programming, this looks probably like a crazy array. That's probably not the way that you've seen arrays a lot of times. A lot of times you've probably seen an array that looks like this. So it'll be array equals this, and then it'll have a bunch of numbers. So there we go. So you've probably seen arrays that look like this all the time, and it's in other languages they call them a list or a few other terms, but for the most part this is just an array. And in JavaScript there's no difference between this array here and this array here. Both of these start with the little brackets and close with the brackets, and then you have items inside of it. So these, like, we can completely ignore all of the stuff inside of it and just say that. We can ignore all of that. And essentially, I'll show you just how similar they are. So I could just say console.log and say array, and I want to get item 1, so I'm just going to say 1. I'm just going to drop the 0 in there, and that's the index to this first item right here. So that's the first one that I want to grab. And I want to do the same thing for this one. I want to grab the first item. Never mind all of the information that's inside of it, it's just an item. So instead of array, I'm going to say users. So there you go. So it returns back the first item. However, this one is just one level deeper because it has an object. An object kind of just creates its own little level. So this integer that I have here doesn't have any levels. It doesn't store any extra data. It just stores this one value of 1. So in this case, for users, I want to get this 1 that's inside of this ID. So I'm just going to say .id. So I'm going deeper into that level. I'm saying I want item 1, and then from item 1, I want to get ID. Coincidentally, if you want to get crazy, which I love getting crazy, so if you want to get crazy, you could say something like const and then do something that's called destructuring, and we're going to say, hey, I want to get ID. So where exactly do I want to get ID from? Well, I want to get it from users 0. And then I can completely just ignore all of this and just say that now I just want to get 1. So at the same time, I could say, I can extract other things from there. So I can say name, job, and age. So let's do a little extra few console logs here. So I can say name, job, age. But that's pretty much what destructuring lets me do. It lets me be lazy, which I love it. So because otherwise I would have to write users 0.id here, and then users 0.name, users 0.job. And if you have a really deeply nested object of data, then you're gonna have to write a lot of lines, and that just gets really bothersome. Now, completely ignoring this, that's just a little bit of extra stuff I like. Another thing that happens with these array of objects, I've already talked about how these objects create an even lower level into your array. So what happens if you have even more data? So let's say more data, and then this is going to be an array, and then this array is just going to have let's say num1 is going to be 1, num2 is going to be 2, and then num3 is going to be equal to another array, and then this one's going to say num4 equal to 4. Oh, wait, I missed the 4 there. It's going to be equal to 4. So, but you get the picture. All right, so now we have an array, we have an object or an item inside of the array, which creates one layer. And then we have a property, and you see right there when I hovered over it, it says property. And this opens up to another layer. And then we have another property. So if I go over to 3, it's going to say property, and that has another layer. So how do we reach that? So initially, when we wanted to reach the first one, we just said users, and then we use this little bracket here with the 0 because that's the index of it. And then we would just call whatever we wanted. So ID, job, age. So we could do the same thing for more data. So we could say more data. And so that returns that first item. So if I were to do something different, such as instead of saying that it's an object, now it's an array. And then, oh wait, sorry, there we go. So now it's an array. So me saying more data is now returning an array. Now, before we do that, I want to actually break my own code here. So at first, I'm going to grab num1. So from more data, I want to grab num1. So, and you see it's returning that 1 right there. Now, if I go back to what I was doing before, put that into an array, it's going to break. It's undefined because now it's an array. So remember when we wanted to talk to this array and grab the first object that's in, or the first item that was inside of this array, I had to tell it what index to look for because this is just an item. That's all it is. So in this case, this is an array that usually houses items. So it knows things, it knows what something is based off of the index of it. So in this case, it's looking for item 1, but it can't find it because I didn't tell it what item 1 is. So it's looking for something called num1, which there isn't one called that. So to fix that, we would just do one of these here and just say grab the first item, and then we can continue on with looking around. So just wanted to go over that real quick before we moved on. All right, so now I want to grab num3 because that one is also nested. So we could say num3, and that returns our item in there, which then I could even go deeper and say num4, and then that gives us that 4 right there. So in this situation, we can go back and do our destructuring and say const and then a little curly brackets. And then I want to get as deep as possible into this. So, but it depends on how you really want to write it. I could just say num4, or I can not go that deep because sometimes there's more data that you might want to grab, such as in this case, I want to be able to grab num1, num2, num3, and num4. So I'm going to say num1, num2, num3, num4, but num4 is deeper than that, so we're going to actually add that there and pretty much write it out the same way. So actually, here we go. So num3 is deeper than that, so we're going to have to go all the way inside of that in order to get num4 and say that this is what we want. So from num3, we want to extract num4. And then there, we could say from, and then we can trace this back. So num4 is already coming back from num3. Now we need to get back whatever num2 and num1 is coming from, which is coming back from more data. So we would have to get all the way from the very beginning. We would have to say users 0 dot more data. So there we go. So now we're getting our num4 from that. So that's deeply nested destructuring. So we can get the value of num4 from that. We can still get num1 and num2. We can't get num3, however, because we've already destructured it here, and we've already told it that we want to get a value from there, so it no longer cares about that. So num3 is not going to work. That's going to be undefined, but num4 is going to be defined. So keep that in mind. All right, so that was pretty much just how to basically communicate with an array and an array with objects inside of it. And there's more stuff that you can do with it, but I think if you understand those basics on there, then for the most part you'll be fine with whatever other stuff you try. Hey, thanks for watching this series. If it helped you out in any way, do me a favor and just like the video, subscribe, maybe even share it either on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. It'll help the channel out, and I'm going to be putting out some more videos in this series. So see you next time.